eternal self is never divided, limitation to your perfect knowledge. Thus, you were sufficiently able to consult with yourself. Yet you called upon me for consultation, as if bewildered, although you are never bewildered, and this act of yours bewilders me. Purport. Uddhava was never actually bewildered, but he says that all these contradictions appear to be bewildering. The whole discussion between Krishna and Uddhava was meant for the benefit of Maitreya, who was sitting nearby. The Lord used to call Uddhava for consultation when the city was attacked by Jarasandha and others, and when he executed great sacrifices as part of his routine royal work as Lord of Dwarka. The Lord has no past, present, and future because he is unhampered by the influence of eternal time, and thus nothing is hidden from him. He is eternally self-intelligent. Therefore, his calling for Uddhava to give him enlightenment is certainly astonishing. All these actions of the Lord appear to be contradictory, although there is no contradiction in the routine activities of the Lord. Therefore, it is better to see them as they are and not attempt to explain them. Therefore, it's better to see them as they are and not attempt to explain them. All these actions of the Lord appear to be contradictory, although there is no contradiction in the routine activities of the Lord. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to the 17th verse, 4th chapter, 3rd canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. Vidura approaches Maitreya. Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Where are you guys coming from?
Bay St. Louis.
Oh, from Bay St. Louis.
Yes.
So close, our county seat. This is still Hancock County.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We didn't know that.
Yeah, we're only a little bit less than a mile from the Pearl River County line on the north.
Okay.
But it's way up in the northwestern section of Hancock County. So we don't exactly have the same worry of a storm surge.
That's good.
Just the wind and tree type of damage.
Which is nice, yeah.
Better than storm.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. You have a motel or business there?
No, I work at University of Southern Mississippi.
And would they have some research facility in Bay St. Louis?
Yes. Well, I live in Bay St. Louis, but I work for USM.
Oh, okay. In Long Beach.
Yes.
Okay. You teach there?
I do research. I don't teach, but I do research.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, we'll research Srila Prabhupada's verse and purport here.
Yeah.
So I didn't get in time. Does somebody want to read the verse?
Read it again? Sure. O my Lord, your eternal self is never divided by the influence of time, and there is no limitation to your perfect knowledge. Thus you were sufficiently able to consult with yourself. Yet you called upon me for consultation as if bewildered, although you are never bewildered, and this act of yours bewilders me. This is the situation for us tiny little parts and parcels of Krishna, technically called Jivatma. The Jivatma is so small that the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, always appears somewhat contradictory because we can't possibly fully understand his actions. He's inconceivable in that sense. We may have a glimpse into his activity, a glimpse into an understanding of his activity, but we can't fully comprehend it because of our size. We're just too infinitesimal, too small. Even the pure devotee, it's not that he tries to understand every little nook and cranny of Krishna's activity, because ultimately it's inconceivable. So it's not something that we attempt to harness with the prowess of our mind. But on the other hand, we just accept the revelation that we're blessed with. There's often an example given that every soul can understand Krishna as much as possible for that particular soul. Just like birds, they can fly in the sky. A sparrow can fly so high, a vulture can fly so high, a hawk can fly so high, and an eagle can fly so high. So they each have that power of flight. So similarly, all living entities, we have our power of comprehension of the absolute truth. And we have to be satisfied with our situation. We can't become dissatisfied in Krishna consciousness and strike out, so to speak, on our own, or set out on our own to comprehend things and give up our shelter of dependence on Paramatma's revelation, or directly Krishna's revelation, whatever it may be. We have our relationship with Krishna, and that's what's important. Not becoming some sort of prominent scholar or whatever it may be in this world, whatever our dharma may be. It's not so important. It's not important at all to do it out of relation from Krishna. Whatever we do, we want to do in love for Krishna. We want to do it in cooperation with Krishna. We want to do it under Krishna's inspiration. We want Krishna's inspiration. We don't want to simply glorify ourselves and pretend to be self-manifest and powerful on our own. We don't want to falsely think ourselves the doer. That is false ego. That is why the poor living entity has come to this state of existence that we find in the world today, where everyone is trying their best to be satisfied, but it's hard to find an Atmarama, a self-satisfied soul, because most of us are acting through false ego. We're thinking, somehow or other, we're thinking in our foolishness that I am the doer. And this is just the nature, under the modes of material nature. Under this influence of material nature, we have this false ego that thinks we are the doer. But in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says just the opposite. We're not the doer. We're simply a tiny soul, and we act according to nature. According to the nature we assemble. If we assemble a big material nature, then we sort of act in that way. Like Ravan had a very powerful material nature, and he was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and he had so much prowess. But his downfall was that he thought he was the doer, and he attempted to even take the consort of Lord Vishnu. He couldn't consider Ram as Vishnu. He considered him as an ordinary human. And so therefore, for Rakshasa to take the queen of some human king, this was okay. Even though warned by his devoted brother Bibhishan, Ravan couldn't listen. He thought Bibhishan some sort of traitor for even thinking like that. But in reality, Vishnu had incarnated as Ram. And, Sita was his eternal consort. And for Ravan to think that he could molest her or simply take her as his wife, or actually win her by the display of his opulence, was simply his foolishness. So we can build up, that type of false ego, even though it may be small in comparison to someone like Robin. Still, it is the same thing. It is a glorification of ourself as independently wonderful and self-sufficient, which is simply Maya, an illusion. The reality is that we are a devotee of the absolute truth, a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We are an eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Vishnu, the Lord Krishna, any of his many incarnations. That is our position. And then we can build up, through that association, a spiritual personality. Like Uddhava. Uddhava admits to being bewildered. It is actually bewildering. I know who you are, but yet you're calling upon me. And you're asking me, and this is our relationship, and I enjoy it. I enjoy being your minister. It's pretty far out that I'm a minister, not just for a great prince or king, but I'm a minister for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he plays the role so well that I really feel what I'm doing is important. But in reality, I know you really don't need my insight, that you could very easily do this on your own, but this is your enjoyment. You enjoy in relationships with devotees. Krishna doesn't enjoy is some, dictator who, if somebody contradicts him or says something that doesn't seem to agree with his opinion, that immediately you're fired and sent away, like Ravan sent Bibhishan away. Or Duryodhana sent Vidura away, simply because he advised him that this will ruin the family. Duryodhana kicked him out. I am the king. You're just jealous, and you're just overly affectionate for those cousins of ours who are habituated to gambling. And so that's not the type of ego that a self-realized soul possesses. A self-realized soul possesses the ego that I am the eternal part and parcel of the absolute truth. I never become the absolute truth, although so many foolish swamis in the world today, they'll many times make many disciples under the pretense that they can become God. When in reality, we never become God. Even if we become a demigod or deva, such as the god of the moon or the god of the wind, it is just a more exalted post within the universe. But they are all eternally servants of Vishnu or Krishna. So that is our eternal role. We may be just a human being, but as a human being, we can also serve Krishna. And it's also very interesting that Krishna appears in the very great families of the world, such as the families that govern the world. Krishna himself, he appeared amongst the Kshatriyas. Ram appeared amongst the Kshatriyas. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Kapila, they appeared amongst the Brahmanas. But really unique is that Krishna spent his whole childhood living with the cowherd people. Now, cowherd people are not scholars. I mean, they don't study the Vedas. They don't, spend 12 years understanding the language of the Vedas, and then, comprehend the proper meter for chanting them and understanding them so that one can give explanation upon every verse. They don't do that. It's not their dharma, their occupation. They protect cows. They protect the earth. They produce wealth in the form of things that people need to live. That's their job. But yet Krishna spent his time amongst them, and to this day, they're considered the greatest devotees of Krishna. And his most famous names are names like Gopal and Govinda, the protector of the cows and protector of the cowherd people. Is Giriraj, who protected all the Brajavasis, from the wrath of Indra. So, they are the greatest devotees. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught that the best way to worship Krishna is the way the gopis worship Krishna, by their constant remembrance of Krishna during the day. When they couldn't be with Krishna or see Krishna because he's off with the cows and the cowherd boys, they would simply hear and chant about Krishna, not in Sanskrit. They didn't chant Vedic verses. They chanted folk songs, all about Krishna's pastimes, in their native language, which is spoken today. Maybe language changes over time, so it may be incomprehensible from what it sounded like 5,000 years ago, but they still speak their own language. So, yet they're considered the greatest devotees of Krishna. Yet they were just cowherd people. Now, we never see Krishna appear amongst the laborer class, nor even any of the devas, except for one. And he had a very sort of ambulant or questionable, sort of contradictory role in Krishna's pastime. He appears as the son of the sun god, but yet he has to grow up with the laborer class, and the people who drove the chariots for the kings. And they didn't always drive them in wars. Wars are something that only, maybe a fraction of the time, unless you're in Kali Yuga and there's some empire that can never stop fighting. I mean, most of the time there's peace in the world. They make peace. And what is the good of Kshatriyas who don't have any diplomacy and can't create peace in the world for the good of the people in general? There's only war when there needs to be war. That's the last straw, so to speak. Even in the battle of Kurukshetra, Yudhisthira made every attempt to make peace, and even sent Krishna himself to make peace, but it became impossible. There was no other route other than to fight for victory. So generally the chariot drivers are sort of chauffeuring the great kings or the warriors around. So our friend Karna had to live amongst the chariot drivers. And he was often criticized by others for not appearing amongst the Kshatriyas, even though he exhibited every qualification as one. After all, he's the son of the sun god. He's born with his personal armor and earrings, and it practically makes him, undefeatable. No one can practically defeat him. You can't even pierce his armor. But yet, his birth would be called into question, and often it was his own fault, because unfortunately his dearest friend was Duryodhana, and they often criticized the Pandavas. So when that would happen, then naturally somebody like Bhimasena, who's full of the greatest passion, would criticize him back. So, but that's unique. That's such a great person. One of the sons of the sun god grew up, like Krishna grew up among the cowherd people, grew up among the chariot drivers. So usually that's not the case. Krishna or incarnations of God, they always appear amongst the leaders of society, because after all, they set an example of leading society. It's also very unique that in this age of Kali, that rather than just accepting disciples amongst the Brahminical class, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted disciples from everywhere. And so have most of his followers. And are quite often criticized by the Orthodox Brahmins for doing so. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu broke open the storehouse of love of Krishna. Because in this incarnation, rather than fighting with and defeating all the demoniac kings, or those Krishna deemed to be unfit to rule, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, appearing amongst the Brahmins, didn't just speak Vedic knowledge to Brahmins, but he brought it out to the people in general. And simply gave them the Hare Krishna mantra. Is everything. That everything would be contained in this one mantra. You just chant it, and you'll develop as much love for me as the gopis in Vrindavan had for me, or as Mother Yasoda had for me, or Nanda Maharaj, or any of my relatives in Vrindavan. You'll develop love for me just like all of my relatives had for me in Dwarka. Or like people in general, even great sages like Maitreya. You'll develop love for me just by chanting this mantra. That is the mercy in Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, a very fallen age, people live a short time, anything can go wrong at any time. Everybody's life is always in danger from either a coronavirus or from, heaven forbid, from a traffic accident, whatever it may be. There's danger at every step. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives special mercy. He says, you just chant this Hare Krishna mantra. It is a great panacea. This mantra can deliver anyone, at any time, in any place. That's the power of Krishna's incarnation. Krishna's incarnation can do anything, and he can even have mercy upon everyone. And the mantra wasn't just given to the highest people in society, but it was given to people in general. And actually the qualification for receiving it, in many cases, if not most, is that one is actually the most fallen. We see Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took the Hare Krishna mantra and delivered it to Jagai and Madhai, fallen Brahmins who had committed every possible atrocity that there was and frightened everybody in the district of Nadia. But yet, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu delivered them, and they became the greatest devotees. But yet they were the most fallen. They didn't deserve anything. You know, they deserved only to go to jail. So this is the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that his interest is in delivering the world. And so, you know, that means everyone in the world. You know, so the Hare Krishna movement, created by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada when he came to New York City in 1965, has traveled all over the world, continues to travel all over the world, and brings Krishna consciousness to people in Siberia, brings Krishna consciousness to people in Alaska, brings Krishna consciousness to people down under, brings Krishna consciousness to people down below at the lowest point in Argentina. It brings Krishna consciousness among Native American Indians. So it doesn't just bring it to people in India. It doesn't just bring it to the Brahmanas in India or the Kshatriyas. It brings it even to the tribal people in India and allows everyone to become Krishna conscious by hearing the mantra, and not only that, but by giving them Mahaprasadam. This is very special. Holy anybody previously got Mahaprasadam. To the extent that Durga Mata became insulted that everyone wasn't getting, that she didn't even get Mahaprasadam. That Lord Shiva took it all for himself. And so she got the benediction that everyone will get Mahaprasadam in Kali Yuga when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes. And so we can't understand the potency of getting Mahaprasadam. You know, a person's whole life can become transformed just by taking Mahaprasadam. So what the temples do when they distribute Krishna consciousness in the form of the holy name and the prasad of the Lord is very great. I mean, who would have ever thought that Jagannath's Rath Yatra, and to this day, his Khan devotees are persecuted by the Brahmins in Puri because they consider they have a monopoly on Jagannath and Jagannath Rath Yatra. But yet ISKCON took Jagannath Rath Yatra all over the world, practically in every big city, like Moscow, London, Tokyo, wherever it may be. Once a year there's a Jagannath Rath Yatra, except during the pandemic. I mean, they don't even have it in Puri then. I think Jagannath got to go out by himself, and only so many people were allowed to stand there. So that's just Krishna's mercy that he's making himself a bit. Why would he go out in New Orleans? I mean, he goes out in Puri, he inspects the town, he sees all the people, he liberates all the people. People even try to throw themselves under his wheels. Let me get out of this material world, it's just a place of suffering. Go back home to Godhead. But even in New Orleans, he goes out and looks at the city and looks at the people. And, who are we to say? Who are we to judge what happens? We don't understand. It's hard to understand. How can we understand? It says that when the Devas see the residents of Bhuvaneshwar on Jagannath Puri, they don't see human beings. They see souls with 4 arms. So how can we understand? Because, we look through human eyes. We don't, like when Arjuna wanted to see Krishna in his universal form, he couldn't. So Krishna says, I will give you divine eyes so that you can see. So only Arjuna could see. And Sanjay, who described it all to Duryodhana, to his father, Dhritarashtra. So this is, Krishna's mercy. Kali Yuga is a very bad age, but it is made very special by the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that everyone can attain love of Godhead, and everyone can go back home to Godhead, and just live as good as we can possibly live in this world, whatever our karma may be, whatever we have to suffer and enjoy, we simply do in service to Krishna, remember Krishna, don't forget Krishna, and this way the devotees in Kali Yuga accomplish what takes the people in Satya Yuga 100,000 years to accomplish. They live 100,000 years, they practice meditation for 10,000 years just to attain perfection. But yet the devotees in Kali Yuga, they attain all this very quickly without performing great austerity, just by chanting the holy name of Krishna and taking Mahaprasadam. So that's the importance of this Hare Krishna movement, that we're distributing Mahaprasadam around the world, and we're teaching everyone to chant the holy names around the world. And then whatever Krishna culture they can involve, then that's for people's good. Because otherwise, in all of the Malecha and Yavana cultures around the world, people are suffering so much. Everything is just made for sense gratification, and ultimately it plagues people. There's There's some austerity built in, just to become highly accomplished in whatever it may be. But then, generally speaking, people indulge in sense gratification, and in these cultures that simply are based upon the slaughter of animals, the drinking of alcohol, the taking of drugs, the fraternizing between men and women constantly, and unnecessary speculation about life, and constantly taking a gamble just to get more wealth. Constantly taking some sort of risk simply to get more wealth. That's what all the cultures are practically based upon. From Alexander the Great, to the Roman Empire, down to the British Empire, to the American Empire, if you want to call it that. The great thing is that there's some freedom to chant Hare Krishna in the world. Even in China, they allow the native people to chant. They don't like foreigners coming there and doing that and teaching it. But they allow, Chinese people chant. In Russia, nobody thought that was possible, but yet, our movement is very big. Many, many Russians become devotees. Even in places like Mongolia, very, very poor countries, in Africa and in Asia, they are devotees and people are chanting Hare Krishna. So that is the great blessing. It's almost 8:15. It's time for us to stop. We'll be serving some prasadam. Maybe Lakshmi here will help you guys get some prasadam.
Do we have the morning prasadam, the Mangalati prasadam?
I've already taken it away. All I have is some fruit from Vedanta Prit's kumquat tree. But there's some sort of breakfast prasadam.